This administration is fundamentally different. They're going out intentionally to violate laws, intentionally to deny civil rights, intentionally to ignore the Constitution, ignore Congress. But this is the appeal. Our liberties, the separation of powers, our constitutional order is at grave risk. And unless the administration pulls back, we are over the precipice.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to George Conway Explains It All. I'm Sarah Longwell, publisher of the Bulwark. And because I'm not a lawyer, I've asked my good friend George Conway to come to the studio and explain all the illegal news of the day.
Last year it was legal news, this year illegal.
Except today.
Patently.
Today.
Oh, today we had some legal news, yes.
Well,
kind of. Yeah.
This is like the good stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so worried that if I read this to you, you're going to cry. It's so good.
I do that for the MAGA people.
You do.
They get
they're thirsty for the tears.
Yes, and it boosts the subscriptions.
You keep MAGA hydrated.
Yeah, I keep MAGA hydrated.
Good job.
They drink my tears.
Let me read you this section from the Fourth Circuit.
Judge J. Harvey Wilkinson.
A Reagan-appointed judge?
Yeah.
So an old-school conservative?
I appointed him, and there he goes again.
That's your Reagan impression?
Yeah.
Oh, no? I hadn't heard that before.
I also had a Jimmy Carter impression that sounds kind of like Bill Clinton.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can get that.
I mean, I used to do much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I used to do these much better. It's like, it's 2025 now.
Okay, well, I'm just going to read this like a normal person. It is difficult in some cases to get to the very heart of the matter. But in this case, it is not hard at all. The government is asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process that is the foundation of our constitutional order. Further, it claims in essence that because it has rid itself of custody that there is nothing that can be done. This should be shocking, not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses still hold dear. The government asserts that Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, he is still entitled to due process. If the government is confident of its position, it should be assured that position will prevail in proceedings to terminate the withholding of the removal order. Moreover, the government has conceded that Abrego Garcia was wrongly or mistakenly deported. Why then should it not make what was wrong right? Yes. I don't read legal opinions as often as you do, but this is a nice, tight, 6-page reading.
Oh, it's a keeper. I mean, it just makes me want to sing, glory, glory, hallelujah. It really is. No, I mean, it is profoundly a moving opinion. And its brevity, it's only like 5 or 6 pages.
It's like 6 pages. I could read it.
And I mean, the context of it, just so that everybody knows, was, I guess it was Monday, Judge Zenas in the District of Maryland basically, is basically saying WTF. And she knows they're stonewalling her and not complying with her orders. And basically she decided she's going to order discovery into what the government is and is not doing to follow her order that the Supreme Court left intact without recorded dissent, her order that says that the government shall facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia to the United States. And then I think we haven't had a podcast since, but there was that absolutely atrocious dog and pony show in the Oval Office where, the two thugs, our thug and the El Salvador thug, were pointing at each other, and basically, the orange thug was saying, well, we can't make the guy sitting next to me, the tin pot dictator from El Salvador, return this guy, can't do anything at all. This man who thinks he's going to make Xi drop to his knees, right?
Yeah.
They can't do anything about
Master negotiator, art of the deal.
About the tin pot dictator.
Yeah.
He's paying millions of dollars to hide these people in a concentration camp.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you've got the tin pot dictator from El Salvador who's not even wearing a tie, right? Not even wearing a tie.
I was assured that if you went into the Oval Office not wearing a tie,
I mean, I would at least button
that
up my
J.D.
shirt, right?
Vance would just materialize and berate you for it.
And say, you should be saying thank you for being here. And you should say thank you by giving us Mr. Abrego Garcia back. That didn't happen.
It did not.
Did not happen. And so, he's basically saying, whoa, we can't do anything about it because what are we going to do? Are we going to smuggle him back in the United States? So he's basically putting it on Trump. They're pointing at each other. It's like, Stephen Miller probably orchestrated this, and
right.
Those statements weren't really consistent. But anyway, this judge is pissed and has every right to be. You don't do this kind of thing. What's going on in this case and other case, which we'll probably talk about, the Boasberg case involving the Venezuelans. I mean, if you were a civil litigant doing this kind of lying, stonewalling, purposely misinterpreting orders, ignoring orders, I mean, basically they're stonewalling and gaslighting federal judges. You would be done.
And the Supreme Court.
Yes, well, they're federal judges too. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I guess that makes sense.
They would fry your ass. The problem is, this is the United States government, and nobody. We've never seen this level of ridiculous contempt for the federal courts by a federal administration. I mean, even President Truman obeyed the order in the steel seizure case that said he couldn't, in an actual time of war. He seized a steel mill in Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio, in order to maintain war production for the Korean War. And he cited his Article 2 powers. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. You need a statute. You just can't take property like that. You need a law. And then, let's leaving apart the question of just compensation. And even Justice Jackson, Truman's own former attorney general, wrote one of the legendary concurring opinions of all time, basically saying, presidents can't do this. And Truman obeyed. All right. And then there are just other circumstances. Nixon turned over the tapes.
Well, they talking here about Brown v. Board of Education.
Brown v. Board of Education, right. Well, Brown v. Board is a little bit different because those were state authorities involved there. Mm-hmm. Those were local school districts. But the federal government, presidents of the United States have obeyed the Supreme Court. And the best example is, again, Nixon, U.S. versus Nixon. And so what's happening here is unprecedented. Now, they're not saying we refuse to obey court orders. They're saying things like, well, there are six reasons why, including the president's foreign affairs power, you can't make us do this. And then they're, misconstruing the order, and they're just playing games. But fundamentally what they're doing is, and the magic word of the day is contumacious, which is the legal adjective that describes contemptuous behavior against the court that violates the court.
Is that what that word is?
Contumacious. Contumacious. Contumacious.
Okay.
Okay, that's what that means. You're going to hear a lot of that word in the not too distant future because that's what that they're engaging in contumacious behavior left and right. And this opinion, what happened here was after, I should have gotten to this a little bit earlier, I'm rambling on. On Monday, I guess it was Monday or Tuesday, Judge Zenas in Maryland in the Abrego Garcia case ordered this discovery that I mentioned. And yesterday, the government filed what's called a petition for a writ of mandamus, which is basically an emergency writ when you don't otherwise have a right to appeal, saying this judge has just done something crazy. Make it stop. And then they also asked for a stay pending the disposition of the petition for writ of mandamus. They filed that yesterday. I didn't even know they filed it until I just got here and you guys handed me this opinion, and then I had to go to the docket sheet to find out what happened because everything's just happening so fast here.
Yeah, this is breaking news.
This is like breaking.
Maybe we should have mentioned this right now.
Literally, this thing dropped within the last hour before I entered this room. And it is 4:20 Eastern Daylight Time on Thursday the 17th. Okay, so the application that was just denied in this opinion was filed yesterday, probably last night. I don't know when. The Abrego Garcia's response is due at 5 o'clock in 39 minutes. The court didn't even wait for the response. They don't have to respond now. The court just said, We don't need to hear from we already know what the answer is. And the answer is no effing way. And that's what you see there. And basically, it's just so eloquent, this opinion. This should be read in every civics class in high school and every government class today in college, because this is what this constitutional crisis that is now boiling is over. And this Judge Wilkinson, this Reagan appointee, just so eloquently explains why we need to have the government, the executive branch, obey court orders. And before it's too late, he says.
I'm going to read the parts.
Right? Before it's too late. Or something like that.
Hold on, I've got these. I've got these. Let me give you some of the other flavors of this.
Can we do like a special pod where I do a dramatic reading of it?
Do you want to read the whole thing? I have sections underlined that I'm going to.
It'll be a separate special pod. You can charge money for it.
Sounds great.
And then somebody and then Barry can sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic in the background.
Okay, or I could just read some of these passages and you could react to them.
I'll just hum the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Great. So right in the beginning, one of the things the judge says out of the gate, while we fully respect the executive's robust assertion of its Article 2 powers, so basically, we get it. You think that you can do anything you want, Mr. President, but we shall not micromanage the efforts of a fine district judge attempting to implement the Supreme Court's recent decision.
So important. They're sticking up for the judge because
right out of the gate.
Because this administration, this lying garbage pail of an administration, can I say that on this podcast?
You can.
Yes, okay. Is lying about these judges. Their radical left says, I'm sure Stephen Miller probably has said that like 6 times already. I don't know. Somebody's saying it. They're saying all these judges like Boasberg, they're radical left.
That's in here. Yeah. We're going to talk about that too.
And remember, on was it Monday or Tuesday, whenever that awful meeting in the Oval Office was, the days are blowing together, Trump basically called the press sick for asking about this case because it's sick to want to return terrorists to the United States. So basically, Donald Trump is saying these judges are all sick because they want to give Mr. Abreu Garcia due process. And the Supreme Court, which said he's entitled to due process without recorded dissent.
So I'm going to skip around because what you're talking about right now, actually, I want to. This judge sort of addresses this thing between the judicial branch and the executive branch. He says, now the branches come too close to grinding irrevocably against one another in a conflict that promises to diminish both. This is a losing proposition all around. The judiciary will lose much from the constant intimations of its illegitimacy. Right. So all of you guys calling us, lefty losers, right. To which by dint of custom and detachment, we can only sparingly reply, meaning because
they're judges, they can't go out on, and say this is bullshit and Miller is a liar and Bondi is a liar and Trump is insane. They can't say these things. That's why we have to say them very loudly.
That's right. But instead, this judge says, the executive will lose much from a public perception of its lawlessness and all of its attendant contagions. The executive may succeed for a time in weakening the courts, but over time, history will script the tragic gap between what was and all that might have been, and law in time will sign its epitaph.
Okay, I'm going to start crying.
I know, don't cry, but I have just a little bit more here.
I'm moved.
It is, as we have noted, all too possible to see in this case an incipient crisis, but it may present an opportunity as well. We yet cling to the hope that it is not naive to believe our good brethren in the executive branch perceive the rule of law as vital to the American ethos. This case presents their unique chance to vindicate that value and to summon the best that is within us while there is still time.
That is just so beautiful, and it is so right, but it is so wrong in the following sense. A losing proposition, the judiciary will lose, the executive will lose much. Donald Trump doesn't think so. He does not fucking care. The good people in the executive, where does it say that, right? Are good brethren there are no good brethren in the executive branch who have any authority.
But that is the appeal. That is who he's appealing to.
This is the moral appeal of the courts to the public.
Yes.
It is a profoundly important moral appeal. This is America. This is what America is supposed to be. And I'm gonna, if I think about it too much, I will be moved again. But the problem is the people in the White House who are, the Donald Trump does not give a shit about this. He does not give a shit about right and wrong. He only cares about power. He's going to treat this with contempt. And so are the people around him who are not good brethren. And Sistren? What's Sistren?
I don't know.
Pam Bondi, forget about it.
Yeah, but so there's one.
So that I put on my JV last hat there.
Yeah, no, I know. And we can get to whether or not it's going to sort of matter. Although at this point.
No, it matters. This has to be.
It does matter.
Has to be fucking said. And again, God bless J. Harvey Wilkinson. This has to be said because this is the historical moment. This is what's at stake. He's basically saying our republic is at stake here. He doesn't use that kind of language, but it's implied. And
it's pretty close to being explicit.
No.
I mean, he's saying that like
language that you would never have thought you would see in a judicial opinion because you never would have thought there would be an executive. Now, executives do stuff that's illegal all the time, and they get slapped down for it, and they say, okay, well, I don't know if we agree with that, but okay. I mean, this administration is fundamentally different. They're going out intentionally to violate laws, intentionally to deny civil rights, intentionally to ignore the Constitution, ignore Congress. And that's why I've been saying now for a couple of months, they're going to ignore the courts. But this is the appeal. This is the appeal to history, to morality, to the public. Please, what is at stake is your liberty. We are here to tell you that, to tell the administration that it is violating the law. That's our job. And our liberties, the separation of powers, our constitutional order is at grave risk. And unless the administration pulls back, we are over the precipice. And that is what Judge Wilkinson is saying here.
Here's when you brought up the Oval Office meeting, which was sort of a sick-making meeting. It was funny, these sort of made-for-TV Oval Office events. I felt very much watching him with Bukele was a lot like watching them with Zelensky, right? It was this like stomach churning, oh my God.
This is insane, right?
He's sitting here like with Zelensky, the Democratic ally, he's chiding him.
Zelensky, the man who is fighting tyranny, and then Bukele, who is tyranny.
Who is a dictator.
Yes.
Just he's a little dictator.
He calls himself a dictator. He calls himself the world's coolest dictator.
World's coolest dictator, yeah, no. Awesome.
Well, Trump probably takes offense at that.
That's true.
He wants
Trump's
to
in the running.
Him.
Yeah. That meeting was insane, but one of the things that came out of that meeting was they caught him on a hot mic. They caught Trump on a hot mic.
And Bukele,
talking to Bukele, saying,
this was the Salvadoran television feed or the Salvadoran government feed.
That's right. It was on while ours was not.
Right.
And so they caught him saying, you're going to need to build 5 more prisons because we're going to send our homegrown.
Yeah, I said homegrown's are next. The homegrown's built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair.
It was like our homegrown ones there.
Yeah, homegrown criminals.
Homegrown criminals.
Right.
Okay, so what's crazy
like
about
us.
Yeah, like us. It was like this judge was responding to the things Trump said in that meeting directly. For example, he says, the executive possesses enormous powers to prosecute and to deport, but with powers comes restraints. If today the executive claims the right to deport without due process and in disregard of court orders, what assurance will there be tomorrow that it will not deport American citizens and then disclaim responsibility to bring them home? And what assurances shall there be that the executive will not train its broad discretionary powers upon its political enemies?
Well, look, I mean, that we didn't need to hear that conversation between Trump and Bukele that didn't make it to the U.S. feed. We didn't need to know that that's what it's at stake.
Yeah.
They don't need to know that the liberty of anybody, the due process rights of anybody, any person in the United States under the Fifth Amendment, if any person, regardless of whether they're aliens, regardless of whether they have a green card or they're here illegally, they're all entitled to due process, as are we. And if somebody is denied due process, then they can deny anybody due process. If you can put somebody in shackles and send them to a gulag in El Salvador without due process, and due process doesn't apply to somebody the Constitution clearly provides that due process applies to, what's the difference?
Actually, this is
other than the color of people's skin,
No, but this is a really important distinction.
And then, of course, to go back to the other point is like, we know what he thinks of his political enemies. We know what he's trying to do with it politically. He promised this during the campaign.
Right.
And basically, so much of what he's doing is about punishing political enemies. And that's a whole nother podcast. That'll be next week.
Well, but here's the thing. It is one thing to say Abrego Garcia is here illegally and should be deported, right? He didn't just get deported, though. He got sent mistakenly to prison.
Correct.
Where there is now no recourse. He has no ability. And I don't think we
have
the
Salvadoran authorities say nobody ever gets out of there alive.
Yeah. And so we don't – look, I think there's a lot of folks in the right-wing media are trying to act as though we are saying this is a great guy. And I don't know. There's weird stuff coming out. It looks like he has some domestic abuse charges, whatever. That is immaterial. This is what I love about this thing is like this isn't about him. It's about us.
Correct.
It's about our system and how we do things. And so you saying that 5 years ago he was committed, he did domestic assault or he was caught with MS-13s, like maybe he's a really bad guy. That is immaterial to whether or not we have due process for sending somebody to prison for the rest of their lives in a different country without any ability to have recourse.
And Judge Wilkinson makes the point early on in this opinion basis, look, if you got the evidence that he's a bad guy and that he should go somewhere, cool, you should be able to present that, no problem. What's the problem? Why don't you do that? And we haven't even heard, you would think that if this evidence existed that he was an MS-13 gang member, that it would have been on Fox News.
Well, it is on Fox News. Now here's the thing.
There's some bullshit evidence that people are questioning, and there may be more, but it doesn't matter is the point.
It doesn't matter is the point. So like he was caught at some point, caught up, and there was like the other guys were MS-13 members, but then there's like the cop that said that he's the
basically.
But here's the thing: they talk like he is 100% convicted of being an MS-13 member, and that's not true.
Right, their own immigration judge didn't buy it.
And so this is like the judge here is basically saying maybe so, maybe not. That's not the point.
No, he exactly used those words. Maybe so, maybe not.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
We don't know. But that's the whole point is the way you find these things out is not by some asshole government appointee going on Fox News and just declaring the conclusion. You put on evidence before a court.
You don't get to just like they're trying to.
This is our system. This is America.
They want to try this like as a PR thing. They want to be like, but he's a bad guy. And I'm okay.
Okay, show us. It's fine.
And they're like, you guys are just saying he's a Maryland father, like he's a wonderful person. Look, I don't.
But the
I
thing
think
is, he probably is. But it's like we can't. We have to presume that he's not the criminal that they're saying he is until they show us some evidence and persuade a court. Meet the requisite burden of proof in that court. And, it's funny. It's like, you do say, obviously the conservative media ecosystem is buying some of this crap from the administration, but not everyone. Even Rich Lowry, he used to be sensible. I saw that today. He used to be sensible in the old days, basically said, well, he is MS-13 or he probably is a bad guy, but we have to give him due process. Even Rich Lowry, who has been basically polluted, beyond anything I could have imagined 25 years ago, is saying that. And I responded on Twitter with a tweet saying, "Could it be? Are we finally standing athwart history, yelling stop?"
That's good. There's only a few people who are going to get that, though. That's a Buckley reference.
You're about as old as not too many people your age or younger will get that.
Came up as like a Buckley conservative.
Conservative, yes.
Well, okay, so I are
the ones standing athwart history saying stop, by the way.
Yeah, and also so is the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Like this is part of it is this 9-0 decision. Then this other judge affirms it and says, like, you got to do it. And this is there's another line in here that I want to highlight because basically you got the Supreme Court, then you've got this saying it. Then you get this other judge saying, all right, let's get a move on. Them saying, no, stop. And this judge being like, no, this judge is right. You guys go. But one of the things that the Trump team was doing is they were trying to get into some semantic debate over the word facilitate. Right? Because the Supreme Court didn't say, go send a plane and get him. They said facilitate his return.
Right. Which basically means take whatever steps you can to do this.
Well, this is my favorite line in this whole thing. I have all the poetry and prose that I've read you is the best, but this one line is, facilitate is an active verb. Like, it requires steps to be taken, as the Supreme Court has made perfectly clear. Right. Like, this is where
they're playing games
they
with
are
the
trying
English
to throw
language.
up all this smoke, and they're trying to make it a PR battle and everything. This is actually quite simple. As this is why, to your point about how this came out an hour before it needed to, and they didn't need to hear Abrego Garcia's. They didn't need any of that. They're like, no, I'm going to write you 6 pages about why this is the clearest it could possibly be, and like, get him back here and
he
do
says
due
that
process.
early on. Wilkins says everybody should read this. We're going to post it again. I think when we post we should put it in the I don't know. But he basically says, so lots of cases are hard. This one is not. He says that right up front. We often struggle with these things.
It is difficult in some cases to get to the very heart of the matter, but in this case, it is not hard at all.
Ding, ding, ding.
That's right. I know. I like it better when you sing than cry. It feels more like exalting.
Well, we're marching on. The truth is marching on here.
This is good. This is good. So let me. I'm going to read you one last passage, and then we'll put this to rest. But one other thing.
I want to do the dramatic reading.
Here, he said the basic differences between the branches mandate a serious effort at mutual respect. So he's saying like, hey guys, there are co-equal branches of government. The respect the courts must accord the executive must be reciprocated by the executive's respect for the courts. Too often today, this has not been the case, as calls for impeachment of judges for decisions the executive disfavors and exhortations to disregard court orders sadly illustrate.
It's stirring language, and it's stirring because we never hear it. And the reason why we never hear it is because we never have to hear it. But the problem now is, and this is right, this is just morally right, factually right, constitutionally right, legally right, what Judge Wilkinson is saying. But the problem is, I don't really associate the words mutual respect with Donald J. Trump.
Yeah. It is true but Donald Trump, I mean, this is only 6 pages and the language is pretty clear that even a layperson like me can get through it. Donald Trump probably won't and can't read through this, but his lawyers can.
It doesn't have his name on it.
But don't you think this is like for the legal people in his world now, the lawyers, you don't think, because in that Oval Office meeting, they tried to act like the Supreme Court's decision was different than it actually was. They're we won. We won in the Supreme Court.
Well, that was Miller. Miller, the sociopath, he's a sociopath.
He is out of his mind.
Absolutely out of his mind. And he was basically saying, that was a 9-0 victory. It's like, dude, that was not a 9-0 victory for you, and this ain't a victory either.
I don't think there's a way that anybody with halfway decent reading comprehension skills could get this one right.
Well, they're just going to say that Wilkinson has been, I don't know, he's anti-Trump and, woke or something like that. But one of the things I thought was interesting is that there are some limits to what Pam Bondi is willing to say and do. She said on Fox News, on one of the evening shows, that, we can't do this to American citizens, which I thought was interesting. At least she's setting a boundary. It's a bridge too far already because it doesn't really answer this case.
Right.
But, this guy is going to push everything to the limit, Trump. And so it's going to be interesting to go, to follow up on your point, to see how far they're willing to go with him. And I think at the end of the day, he'll take them there bit by bit by bit, because these people have shown no spine so far. They are completely, we have a president who is morally depraved. He is the height of moral depravity. And what's enabled him is moral apathy in the public, moral cowardice among Republicans, and moral corruption of people who want to work for him and want to keep their jobs. And their status in this authoritarian regime. So I think that, yeah, the lawyers must be reading this and saying, but at the end of the day, a lot of these people are just going to keep going because they've marched this far already with the guy. I mean, it's like the frog boiling in the pot thing, right? This is already so far beyond the pale. It's unbelievable. If you just described this 5 years ago, I mean, we don't have to get to the point where they're taking Americans off the street because they subscribe to the Bulwark.
Yeah.
We don't have to get that far. It's already really, really bad. But this guy, there is no bottom with him. That's the thing. There is no bottom.
Because that's what authoritarians do, right?
Correct.
They try to push the limits as far as they can to see what they can get away with, which is why, there's Democrats have been kind of having this weird internal debate, like, why are we focused on this case versus, the economy, Trump's doing the economy? And I'm like, this is one of those things where, and look, I'm a messaging person, and I think people often need to focus on, things that help diminish the other side or like look for their
mortgage rates. Absolutely.
But you know what? This is one of those things that cuts right to the heart of who we are.
And we need to re-educate Americans about that. Because if they don't understand this, we're never going to get back to normality.
Yeah, right. And I understand why it's hard for an American to be like, okay, but this guy's like an MS-13 person. He's like, okay, deport him. But if you don't help people understand that, like, if they can do this, just disappear people without any due process. If we just say that's okay, it has fundamentally changed what America is, and it's changed it for you too.
Yeah, well, and that just reminds me of the clip that went viral, I think yesterday, where Grassley was confronted by his constituents, and somebody basically made the point: wait, if I get fined $1,200 and I don't pay that, and I ignore the court's order, I mean, what happens to me? Why does the Trump administration essentially get to do that? Very good. That guy, hire him. That guy's a messaging genius, right? I mean, it's
he understands the intuitive part of it.
That's the intuitive part. It's like, wait a minute, I have to obey the rules. So has the government has to too. In fact, it's more important for the government to obey the rules because the government has way more power than any of us.
All right. We got to get an ad in. Throw it to me, Bear.
What is it? Oh, one skin.
Okay.
Oh, let's do it.
If you're like me, you've noticed that getting older is full of little wake-up calls. Oh, brutal. You start seeing more hair in the drain. God, this is so horrible. Your part looks wider, and suddenly you're zooming in on old photos, wondering
write this for you?
Wondering if your hair was always this thin. Oh my gosh. That's why I'm really loving what One Skin is doing. Their OS1 peptide has been transforming our skin. Here at George Conway explains it all for a while. Now with their new scalp serum, OS1 Hair, it's here to help us with hair loss, thinning, and shedding. Do we need to take a look up there?
I think it would have happened by now. I'm 61, so it would have happened by now.
Yeah, look at you holding on to that hair.
Yeah, look at that.
That's good.
Look at that. I can twirl it too. Look.
Now, why would a skincare company create a scalp treatment? Because the scalp is skin. You're making great points here. And just like the rest of your body, it experiences cellular aging. But instead of wrinkles, it messes with your hair follicles and natural growth cycle, leading to hair loss and thinning.
What do you say we send a bottle to Stephen Miller?
I don't think his is thinning. I think that's a lost cause, is what you call that. OS1 Hair is the first scalp serum powered by One Skin's OS1 peptide, which targets those aging cells called senescent cells. Say it with me, George. Senescent cells.
Senescent.
And it's scientifically proven to help your hair cells do what they're meant to do. Grow fuller, denser, healthier hair. Get to the root of hair loss and thinning with OS1 Hair. That's good.
Root of hair loss.
Good. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
You'll save 15% on your first purchase with code AskGeorge at oneskin.co. Okay. Who are we going to try this on? Oh, you know who needs it? JVL. JVL. He's always wearing that hat to like act like you can't see.
I think that video would go viral.
We're going to send him
that video
OS1 hair. Yeah. That's going right to JVL. I haven't tried their hair, as you can see.
You're his best friend.
As you can see, I have. I have lots of hair. It goes very fast. But all I know is that OneSkin's products have been the best. I keep it around the office. Absolutely. I use the body lotion. I use the eye stuff all the time, and I know you do too.
I do too. Yeah.
Get you putting it on.
My eyes look better than they did.
They do.
6
They look
months
great.
Ago. I do it twice. I do the eye stuff twice a day.
Yeah.
And it's like my eyes were always baggy, even in baggy, kind of dark, even when I had like 40 hours sleep. I mean, it's like, it does work.
And now that you're back out in the social pool, it's very good to have nice, skin.
Hey, baby.
Okay, founded and led by an all-women team of skin longevity scientists. OneSkin is redefining the aging process with their proprietary OS1 peptide, the first ingredient proven to help skin look, feel, and behave like its younger self. Get 15% off with code AskGeorge at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code AskGeorge. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Guys, support our show and tell them we sent you. Invest in the health and longevity of your skin with OneSkin. Your future self will thank you.
It's impressive that we can have that much fun with an ad when the economy is being destroyed and the republic is die.
Okay, so let's get to more deportations, although this time we're talking about Venezuelans. So this is the other case you were talking.
This is the case with all the people they put on the plane and the shackled and heads down and marched.
So this is the removal of the Venezuelan nationals to a prison in El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act. We got a strong 46-page opinion, so I'm not going to read that one, from Judge Boasberg this week, finding probable cause to hold the Trump administration in criminal contempt. But now you have to explain that. What does that mean?
Okay, look, I mean, there are I think it's important to sort of take a step back and to go through something that even a lot of lawyers don't fully understand, which is the difference between civil and criminal contempt. And yes, he was focused to some extent on criminal contempt, but there's a couple of paragraphs in there where he may have also been focusing on civil contempt. There's a little ambiguity there. So I'm going to go through it all. Basically, there are two types of contempt, civil contempt and criminal contempt. And what the difference is, it's got nothing necessarily to do with the type of case it's involved in, like the civil case or a criminal case. The difference between civil and criminal contempt is the purpose of the sanction. Let's say you get a grand jury subpoena.
Okay.
And you're being asked to testify before the grand jury about your conversations with JVL about his hair.
Yeah.
Okay. And you say, no fucking way, I'm not doing that. But the government can go in, the U.S. attorney, the nut job, interim U.S. attorney Ed Martin can go.
Eagle Ed Martin
can move to enforce that subpoena against you or compel you to testify to the grand jury. And if you disobey that order, then the court can hold you in civil contempt. And why civil, even though it might be a criminal investigation with a grand jury? Because the purpose of civil contempt is to coerce compliance with an order that can still be complied with. It's to basically say, look, you have the keys to your own jail. I'm going to put you in jail, Judge Conway says, until you appear before the grand jury. We'll let you out of jail to appear before the grand jury, and you can purge your contempt and set yourself free by testifying and obeying the subpoena. And until you do, you're going to sit in the tank. And that's what happened. That's what happens occasionally when, like media types, right? When they claim that the subpoenas violate the First Amendment, or there was this famous, that's so old, Susan McDougal in the Whitewater investigation like 25, 30 years ago.
This was like Judith Miller too at the
New York Times.
Times.
You could sit in jail for a very long time if you refuse to testify, refuse to follow a court order. So that's the point. Civil contempt means coercive. Criminal contempt is a criminal sanction. Criminal contempt means you're seeking to punish. Okay? So that's when somebody violates an order and it's done. There's nothing else to compel. You can't fix it anymore. The folks are in El Salvador, or they're, whatever happens to them. They can't come back. Let's suppose they can't come back. That's criminal. And there are two types of criminal contempt. One is there's summary criminal contempt, but that's a very narrow circumstance. That's when something happens inside the courtroom that the judge actually personally witnesses. Like somebody throws paint at the jury.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The judge can say, you're going to jail. I sentence you to 2 weeks in jail and fine you $1,000. Marshals, take them away. That's it. That's all the process the persons do. And even though it's criminal,
right.
Basically the only recourse is then to go up to the Court of Appeals and say, well, that was a little excessive, Court of Appeals. So that's summary. But for all other criminal contempts that are indirect criminal contempts, don't happen in the courtroom, such as what Boasberg is talking about, I think, deporting these people, continuing to send the planes, turning these prisoners over to the Salvadorans in El Salvador. That's a fait accompli. It didn't happen in front of the court. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, it's a real criminal case. There has to be generally speaking, there has to be an indictment and there has to be a jury if you're going to sentence them beyond 6 months. And the case has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, as opposed to civil, which is clear and convincing. So that's what he's contemplating here by saying probable cause. He's saying there's probable cause for the appointment of a prosecutor. And the normal procedure under Rule 42, I think it is, of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, is that the court can request the Justice Department to appoint a prosecutor. Okay? And if the rule says that if the Justice Department declines prosecution, okay, like for example, in the Biden administration, we saw this with both Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon. The Justice Department, the Biden Justice Department, did prosecute those two individuals. Didn't prosecute. There was some other person they didn't prosecute. But Bannon had to spend 6 months in the pokey because he was found guilty in his conviction. They didn't get a stay of the sentence on appeal. That's criminal contempt. It requires a prosecution, requires a jury trial, requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, here's the problem. There are a couple of problems here. One problem with criminal contempt is if the Justice Department refuses, then the court, according to the rule, has to appoint its own prosecutor. And the Supreme Court did say, in a case called Louis Vuitton, back in 1987, did say, we agree. I mean, that's something that courts can do. The problem is that may not be true. The Supreme Court's jurisprudence is actually overall inconsistent with that, particularly as it's developed since 1987. And the problem is, and we've talked about the Appointments Clause before, is the Appointments Clause. The Appointments Clause says that a superior, non-inferior officer, superior officer has to be appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate of the United States. And under the Supreme Court's jurisprudence of what is an officer who is not an inferior officer, what do they call it? It's basically a superior officer, somebody who is not responsible to anybody at all is not an inferior officer. They're basically the big actor, and like Elon is. Mm-hmm. They're exercising executive power, so they are an executive officer. They're not inferior. They've got to be appointed by the president. And there's a very substantial argument, and there was a case involving a very bad lawyer named, bad meaning not a good person lawyer, Steve Donziger, who was held in criminal contempt in the Southern District of New York after the court there appointed a special prosecutor. And he petitioned for a writ of certiorari, and two Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, dissented from the denial of certiorari. There were a bunch of screwy aspects in the case, which are probably why the case got denied. And they said, our cases don't allow this. And it's not, these right-wingers being right-wing. They're actually probably, I know at least two liberal law professors I was discussing with it online today, or they were discussing it, but I was like silent listening. They agree. It's not consistent with it. So there's a serious question as to whether or not, if the Justice Department refuses to prosecute what Boasberg views as a contempt or probable cause for contempt, whether he can appoint a prosecutor, which means it wouldn't be able to do it. But there's a more fundamental problem with all these contempts, forms of contempt, which we've talked about before, which is no matter which kind of contempt you go for, it requires in some fashion the involvement and cooperation of the United States Department of Justice. Civil contempt. Who enforces the civil contempt order? The United States Marshal Service. And who do they work for? Pam Bondi and Donald Trump. If you have even a summary criminal contempt, it doesn't require a prosecutor, doesn't require due process, doesn't require a trial, doesn't require proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just somebody throws paint at the jury. And suppose that person is a friend of Donald Trump's, okay? The marshals might be ordered not to take him away. And the marshals don't work for the judge. They work for Donald Trump. And even if they do take him away, where are you going to put him? Federal Bureau of Prisons? Well, guess who they work for? The Department of Justice, Donald J. Trump. So they just say, we're not taking this guy. So that's similar. And then criminal contempt, full-blown indirect criminal contempt that requires a prosecutor. Well, you're done if it turns out.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching the show. If you want to catch the rest of this episode, then go become a Bulwark Plus subscriber. The link to become a subscriber is right below here in the episode description. Click on that, become a Bulwark Plus subscriber, catch the rest of the show, and support all the great work we do here at the Bulwark. Thanks, guys.
Well, George Conway, he's a man with a plan. Got to sit down with Sarah Longwell, take a stand, explain all the legal problems they're piling high. With Donald Trump, oh my, oh my, oh my. He said, Sarah, let me break it down for you. There's obstruction of justice, corruption too, the legal tangles and troubles, they're growing fast. It's a storm that's gonna last and last. Oh, Conway, tell Longwell all about it. Those legal problems can't live without it. From the emoluments to the Russian ties. Oh, Sarah, listen close.